Hey, you know what? We're doing it.
What? Doing what?
The Christmas thing. We're making all those toys.
Hello, my name is Florian Aupetit. I'm lighting supervisor on Klaus, and in this video I will explain you the process we use to shade the characters. So the first thing to do when we start a shot from a new sequence would be to find the color palette for all the components of light. But in this case, since we did this shot late in the production, the artist could just import the color palette we used in similar shots. So we used roughly 10 components to describe the light. The shadow and the sunny side are linked together. AO stands for ambient occlusion, so we would use this to amplify the volumes by increasing the contact between two objects. The secondary is the bounce light layer, so we would use it to describe the volume by adding light on the part of the character usually facing the ground. Ambient layer would be used to add light coming from the sky in the shadow parts of the character. So if the character is outside, we would add a delicate cool light on all the parts facing the sky, while on the interior we would just pick another color. The custom layer is, as its name, a layer we use to do a bit of everything, but most of the time we use it to do the occlusion, because it would give a kind of different look than the ambient occlusion component. Translucency would be used to do the scattering of the light through the skin, like in the ears or the fingers, or even through cloth. SSS skin is a parameter to control the color of the gradient between light and shadow, so most of the time it was a reddish color, like maybe orange. But we realized that colors like that create a weird effect on the rest of the character, so we decided to split it and separate the SSS on the skin and on the rest, like his clothes, his hair, or any props he would use. The specular layer would be used to do the reflections in the eyes and other types of reflections if needed in the shot. And finally, the rim light layer, as its name again, would be used to do the rim light on the character. But through the production, we realized that we could use all those layers differently. So for example, the custom layer to do the occlusion, or the secondary layer to do the rim light. It would just give a different effects. So at the end, it was really an organic process. So back to the shots, I would tell the artist to first start with the shadows. It's the most important part of the shading, because no matter what you put on top of it, if the foundations are wrong, then your shot will look wrong. So we could spend lots of time on those shadows, and then the rest could be pretty fast. Also, sometimes you can briefly see a black screen with white shapes, and this is how we select the parts of the character we want to work on. So the ink and paint department would provide a series of masks, breaking down all the different parts of the characters, so we can work on the face of Jesper without affecting the hair or the eyes or even the teeth. As you can see, the process is pretty organic, especially at the beginning. She's jumping from shadow to occlusion or secondary and goes back to the shadow layer. And that's because she's blocking the shapes and the intensity of those shapes before animating. And actually that would be a good moment for me to check if the shapes are right, or the intensity and even the colors, before they start animating everything. Because as I said, if the foundations are wrong, the artist would waste a big amount of time animating all those shapes for nothing. So let's go back to the occlusion pass. Occlusion is a bit tricky, not because of the technical aspect like where you should put it or how big it should be, but more in an artistic point of view. Because if you push it too much, the character would become quickly dirty, so it has to be very subtle, just to underline some volumes, like here under the lips. Also, we realized that putting occlusion in the lit areas would increase this dirty effect, so we would put it only on the shadow parts to keep it clean. And here you can also see that she's adding extra details on the face between the eyes. So now she's jumping on the ambient light layer. And as you can see, the intensity is way too high, so she's adding an extra layer on top of it to control the overall opacity of the shapes in the layers below. And this is a good way to avoid overlaps. So basically on the layer face, you put all your shapes at 100% opacity, and then you control the overall intensity by adding an extra shapes on a different layer to only control that opacity. So if your character is going from inside to outside, this is an easy way to animate the intensity of the global ambient light, because you just need two keys to control it. So now you see that she's starting to animate everything. And like in digital painting, no one has the same process. So I would split it in two parts. The first one would be to globally start big and then going into details, while the second way would be to start, let's say, with the face, animate all the shapes through the shot, and then when it's done, you move to another part, like the hair and so on. But again, it would be a good moment for me to talk with the artist and check if everything is fine, and see if we can maybe simplify shapes or not. And if everything is good, then he or she can start animating everything. I mean, maybe not in this shot because it's a very easy shot. Jesper is not moving too much, except maybe the eyes and the mouth, but honestly it's fine. Because we have a pretty powerful tracking system in class, and in this case we can go at the end of the timeline, adjust the shapes, or ask class to adjust them for you and tweak them to quickly check if the animation is working or not. So now to add more details, she's adding a layer of occlusion for the eyes and the teeth. And remove the occlusion by using two circles with feather, so it's only visible on the lower part of the eyes. She will do the same for the teeth, and finally with another shape she will control the global intensity of the occlusion of those elements of the face. The coat is a good example of balance between soft and hard edge. Because of the beginning of the production, lots of lighting artists were putting lots of feather in almost every shapes they were using, and that would create a kind of airbrushy effect we didn't want. So it was very important to keep a good balance between hard and soft to really control the edges. It's a bit like playing with curves and straight lines when you are designing or animating a character. So at this stage it's mainly refining the shapes, at least for the occlusion pass, and in this case it's pretty fast to do because Jesper's animation again is not complicated. But if let's say his hand goes over his face, then the tracking system will be kind of lost and we will have to spend more time refining those shapes. Even if we had different tracking modes to fix that problem, sometimes it was inevitable. Most of the time I would ask the artist to put more work on the face than on the rest of the character, because it's fine if a shape is missing somewhere in the coat or in the shoes, but if something is missing on the face, then we can lose the emotion coming from the performance of the character. So yes, working on the face was pretty important. That's why she's working on the coat at the end. Also, I used to say the motto of the department was simpler is better. Because at the beginning, lots of artists would fall into that trap of overshading the characters by putting too many shapes. And sometimes you just need one clean shape and it will do the job and will make your life easier in the animation part of the process. The other thing that can be very tempting to do is to follow the lines from animation. And sometimes, yes, it's working, but in other cases, like the cloth, it was better to just get rid of them and describe the volume by yourself with light and shadow. So here she's adding a shape in the translucent layer on the ear, and even if it's not really visible, because the best would be to have a strong light coming from the back, it adds an extra touch of details. So if you simplify Jesper's head, it's a kind of stretched box. So to describe more the volumes, we can use the ambient light to shape the top of the forehead and the top of the cheeks. Then she reduced the opacity to make it really delicate, and she will finish to animate all the shapes until the end of the shot. And then to increase again the feeling of volume on the eyes, she's adding an extra shape to catch the ambient light on the top surfaces. And this is the final stage where you refine your shapes, you add more details if needed, and that's what we call polishing the lighting. Finally, the last part is to add bouncing light, and in this case we would add it only on the bottom part of the nose and the lower part of the eyes. It will make the character more volumetric and appealing at the same time. And here is the final result.
Hey, you know what? We're doing it.
What? Doing what?
The Christmas thing. We're making all those toys.